Welcome to the Nurturing Minds podcast,
a science-driven approach to parenting and education.
We are two parents, two scientists, and two people who care deeply about raising kids who are resilient, confident, and happy.
In a world that's becoming increasingly digital, we believe real connection, emotional well-being, and curiosity matter more than ever.
In each episode, we share insights from latest research, our own experiences, and conversations with experts from around the world to help you support the children in your life. I'm Dr. Sonali Dasgupta, a research scientist turned educationist, mentor to talented teenagers, and founder of the STEM Monsters education platform.
And I am Dr. Blanka Kellermayer, neuroscientist, mom of two very active boys, certified parenting coach, and founder of Dr. Blanka Peaceful Parenting. I would like to introduce today's guest. We're very excited to have with us today Danielle Baker. And Danielle is the founder of Being Connected eLearning Inc. with 20 plus years of experience as a registered early childhood educator, TV and podcast host, and author. She creates educational programs offering inclusive resources to help children thrive. When she is not working, Danielle loves bugging her grown sons. So welcome, Danielle. And I would like to ask you to tell us a little bit about your journey from early childhood education to founding Being Connected. What led you to focus on individual learning styles and communication?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Blanka, and thank you, Sonali. I'm really excited to be on. We've been talking so much in the last little times of getting together. Like, this is really exciting for me. And thank you for having me on. My journey it's always funny when I explain it, but I did kind of stumble onto it because I'm originally in science. My background is in physics. I always say that science is my first love. And so Sonali knows exactly what I mean. And so, but I've always been everything that I've done always kind of revolved around children, even when I was younger. So it kept calling me. And I always say when we're in education, when we work with children or in the health system, even it's not a career, it's a calling. So I really realized that it was a calling. And so I started in early childhood education. It was very interesting for me studying the human development from birth right up until the end. And I just like the idea of being able to help children kind of thrive in their lives and give them a fair start in the beginning. So I worked in daycare setting, childcare centers in schools as well. And that's where the 20 plus years experience comes in. And decided to start my business, Being Connected, just because, especially lately with all the changes in the education system, the policies and the laws, they don't really reflect what the children actually need. The focus has been taken away from the child. We're really more into the administration side of things. And it is hard when you're in the system to be able to help the parents, to be able to help the teachers with giving them the resources and the support that they need. So I found that, especially working with families, was doing it on my own, kind of privately with my own business. I was then able to help them a little bit more, provide them with the help that they actually needed for their child, as opposed to trying to fit their child into that box that we're so stubborn to we can't let go of. So
yeah, I completely get you. I mean, you very rightly said that the whole system has moved away from being child-centric for who it is supposed to be to becoming something which is admin-centric or outcome-centric, and the whole being of a child is lost in this whole translation of making it a system. And that's what we are all trying to do, isn't it? To be in the system to support the people who are integral to part of it.
And it is a challenge, especially as I was a daycare principal or a supervisor, is they still say that the curriculum at the core is putting the child in the heart of everything that we do. And yes, there's a child there because we need a child to run a daycare or a school, but the process of even problem solving or anything, it's not there. So it's conflicting. It's very hard, and it leads to burnout, and it leads to difficulties, spreading ourselves thin, trying to do as much as we can with the system that it kind of working against what we're trying to do. So it's
and
difficult.
I'm
So that's
glad.
why.
Yeah, I'm glad you
Go.
mentioned that, Danielle, because I also noticed, being a parent myself with kids in childcare, I noticed that many times it feels like they're showing off to me, like it's like to show to me they do all these things, and I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, but I mean, that's fine. I don't need to know these things. What I want to know is that my child is in good hands, my child is connected to their caregiver, and I think sometimes people forget that, and it's also not to put any blame on childhood educators, because I think, as you mentioned, they are stretched too thin. There are these extra demands. They have to fill out all these forms all the time, and so yeah, do you have any take on this?
Absolutely, and you're absolutely right, because as a parent, I've seen it, and I've lived it myself. Is the because we have to kind of prove the work that we do, and we have to show that we are observing the child, and that we're working on the curriculum. A lot of the times, those conversations are just very logistic
Shallow.
or oriented. And a lot of the times parents is like, oh, this is great. Yeah, I already know this about my child. Did you actually notice my child? And did you actually work with them on certain things? And then we're really caught up. And you're also right, Blanka, that the educators, like I said, it's a calling. We want to help children. We want to, give them a fighting chance for the world that they're going to be going up against. But it because we're expected to do all these reports, because we're supposed, for teachers, I'm talking about educators, but for teachers, they need to show the grades, right? They need to have high performing students. uh, it's hard to go back to okay, what does the child actually need? This is what the system needs. This is what the administrators up at the top want to see. They want to see the numbers. They want to see the stats. They want to see where they can get their funding. But so it kind of takes away from what the child actually needs. We're working on what the adults need more than the decision maker. What they need is more than what the child actually needs. And this is where we're failing the students. We're failing the children, because we're not actually addressing the needs that they require.
No, I completely understand where you're coming from. And the fact that it's not just one child. As a parent, you still have one child, you are focusing on two children. But as an educator, you have a classroom full of students, each one with their different learning styles. And how do you make it into an environment which allows all of these children with different learning styles to kind of thrive at the same time? And that brings us to the crux of this conversation of today, where we want to understand this particular thing. When you have 20 children, 30 children in a classroom, everybody with their own learning style, how do we empower the educator, the teacher, or even the parent for that matter, to understand what works best for the children? Now, I'm aware of the VARK model, which is the visual, the more four main learning styles, not going into the depth of visual, auditory, reading, writing, and kinesthetic learners. But you are the expert here. So I would like for you to explain to our viewers what are the main primary learning styles that a student has. And is there anything beyond the VARK model, which, there are nuances which we can pick up on to understand what kind of a learner our student or our child is?
That is, thank you so much, Sonali. And I know we spoke about this when I had you on my show, is there's the education system that we're working with right now is very outdated for maybe a couple of centuries. Even we're not raising factory workers anymore. We are raising world leaders. So we do need to address their particular needs. And when you look up learning styles, you'll find different. They could be 5, they could be 6, they could be 13. There's so many of them. And you don't have, it's just like personality traits. You don't just have one, you have quite a combination. So it does get complex, and it can be overwhelming for somebody who's already overwhelmed in their classroom to say, how am I going to integrate that into the program? But it's actually that's what we need to change is our way of thinking, is that we're not integrating it. We're getting rid of the old system so that we can actually address the needs of the realities of today. So the ones that I work with, I work with 6 main learning styles because I find they show up in everybody. So I do have the auditory, visual, kinesthetic. There's the solitary learner, the social learner, and we also have, I didn't say them in order, so I forget my last one, but essentially it is just, could be a combination of all of them, and that's who they are. That's how they learn. That's how they process things, how they process any information that comes in. So when I say there's more, I myself, I am a solitary visual kinesthetic learner. I like to learn on my own. I was just because that's how I learned to learn. Schools did not work for me. I was a high performing student, but I needed to get my hands on there. And I was visual. And this was in the time where there were no projects. Well, there were projectors, but nobody was using them. There were no visual aids. It was just the teacher talking to the board. It wasn't even making any kind of contact. So it was difficult for me. I had to stay all day at school and then go home and learn myself. So this is what I mean by we go way back. It's not just an issue now, but so working with those learning styles, the child is telling you how they learn. So we don't have to invent or recreate new learning lesson plans. We don't have to recreate our classroom every time there's a new child coming in. That's not it. That's what a lot of people say. I am stretched thin. It's difficult to have 30 students in my class. Some of them need additional support. And how am I going to do this? And it starts with, once you know how each child learns, it's just a matter of, the word that comes to mind is enriching. So you're kind of creating a healthy learning environment for your classroom. You don't have to do 30 different lesson plans to accommodate 30 children, because we have a variety of those learning styles in us. We can just have that one lesson, but change your learning environment, change your classroom so that the kinesthetic students can get their hands on something. They can actually feel what they're learning. And the solitary one can be kind of tucked away on a side, a bit more quiet, where they can learn the way that they feel more comfortable with. Your talkers in school, your social learners, the ones that so-called disrupt the class, you can have them involved in the lesson where they come up and present. So you're creating this dynamic environment in the school where the kids are actually excited to learn, because now those who seek attention are getting the attention that they need. Those who need to, move, they can stand up and do what they need, and it's not going to disrupt the class. In fact, once you get used to it, it doesn't change like that overnight, but once the class gets used to this new environment, you are putting out less fires in your classroom. So all the energy that you're putting in a day to calm students down, to dismantle a conflict between students, to pay attention to a meltdown, all of those things are now being redirected to your actual curriculum, where you can learn, you can teach what you were planning on doing that day. And it takes a lot less energy at the end of the day than it does to put out these fires.
I love that. And Danielle, you mentioned that each child has their own learning style, and it could be a combination of different styles. Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit about, like, how can parents or educators even, how can they begin to identify what a specific child's learning style is?
I love that question. I get goosebumps every time. You'll have to keep me on track with time, because I could talk about this all day. But it really does start with the parents. And that's why when I wrote my book, I decided to go with the parents, because it starts from birth. You're going to be able to tell, if you know what to look out for, you'll be able to tell how your child interacts with you. Because that's really what it is in the beginning, in the newborn years, is how do they react? Do they react to sound? Do they react to your voice? Do they react to your face when you're in their face? How do they play? And this is where the most important thing is once they get older, is it's play will tell you exactly how your child learns. And it will also tell you where they need their support, where they may have some challenges that we need to work on. So we're taking the guesswork out of teaching. Now we know where the child, if they're at the park and they're jumping and you can notice that maybe the motor skills are not where they should be, you already know because you've had them jump around. If they're sitting down in a classroom, you don't know if they need to work those muscles. Same with the fine motor skills. They come into class and we're expecting them to cut with scissors or with a pencil, but did they actually get to work those muscles? So it's through play that you will see auditory learners will react to sound. They will not necessarily be startled when there's a loud sound, but if there's music in the background, you'll see that they're a little bit more focused, or if they're singing to themselves or telling themselves stories when they're doing a puzzle or coloring where they're focusing, that kind of tells you that they need that kind of background help. I guess I can say learning help. That's right. The kinesthetics are definitely the ones that you can spot right away because they're the ones that are in the mud. Everything you're not supposed to touch, they're touching. They're jumping off the furniture. So those are my favorite. So they're the ones that love science experiences. They love to get messy. They love to paint. They just kind of, you need to have that. So children learn through their senses. So that's the best way that I can give a visual to parents or even teachers, is they're learning through their senses. So observe when they're playing. And it does have to be free play, because structured play is not real play. The child is not being who they truly are. They're being who you want them to be, right? There are rules. You're supposed to do this. There are restrictions. So of course we have to keep our children safe, but it is, does your child prefer to be tucked on the, when you have a family get together, is your child kind of staying quiet on one of the chairs, kind of moving away from the cousins? That could be your solitary learner. Is it they're the ones that just can't stop talking? Well, that will be your social learner. And for teachers and educators, then they will see it right away. The ones that are always wanting to touch something, though, you're going to want to create a learning environment where they have that opportunity. Instead of measuring with a ruler, maybe we can give them blocks, maybe we can give them other things, sticks that they can collect outside. Can we bring in Play-Doh? Can we bring in something tactile that they can touch while they're learning? Is the classroom too loud? Now, I'm not talking about maybe sensory processing issues there. We're just talking globally in the classroom. If it gets too noisy after a while, your solitary learners are going to get tired. They're the ones that don't disrupt the class, but they do need that time to kind of recharge their battery. Those who are kinesthetic, if you're punishing them at school by taking recess away from them, you're setting yourself up for a tough ride in the afternoon, because they weren't able to let that energy out. So that's kind of, it's very vague. I understand I could go into more details, but it really is from birth how they react to you. When you come up to them, do they want to touch your hair? Do they, are they constantly touching your face? Those are your kinesthetic tactile learners. Everything goes in the mouth, that kind of thing. So those are little cues. And again, they could be different ones all at once, but those are the cues you need to look out for. And as a parent, you can relay that information to the teacher to say, hey, this is how they learn best.
No, so sorry. As you were speaking, I'm so glad you brought it up. And I could actually summarize so many points in that conversation that you made. So the thing which still comes back as a rooting, the core point which comes back to the center is observation, either as a parent or as an educator. Because until and unless you're observing the child, all of this does not make sense. Everything here is absolutely not making any sense if you are not able to figure out what the child is doing. That's one. And the other thing which I wanted to actually come back to, and I'm so glad you mentioned it, is about a lot of parents believe that, oh, I'm just sending my child to a tennis class, I'm sending my child to a chess club, they are playing. That is not play. Play is where there are no guidelines. Of course, safe, as you said, we need to keep them safe, but that unstructured play, especially in the forming years, is so crucial for the children to even figure out for themselves as to what kind of interests them. It's not just the parent, isn't it? We have been talking about this, Blanka, about how important it is to give unstructured play to the children, isn't it?
Yes, definitely. And I think we could go on any tangent here about like how like outside of the academic environment, whether or not to enroll our kids in these activities and stuff. I think we can definitely have a session on this later, because there's so much scientific evidence supporting the need for downtime, for unstructured time, for play, and that's without screens even. So like, you know,
Yeah.
many topics we could
Yeah, I know. I was just thinking when she was talking about the auditory learners, when my daughter has these headphones on when she's doing maths, and I could never do that. I was always solitary, and I needed to read and write on for it to actually embed into my brain. So I always wrote things, and she would just not do that. She's listening to music. I'm like, you cannot be listening to Taylor Swift, and then on the other hand, you cannot be solving math problems. That doesn't work. No, that's how I learn. And I realize sometimes it's so difficult to comprehend because we don't learn that way, and it's very easy for us to think that that doesn't work. And I was telling myself while you were explaining all the four different learning styles that I need to step back, and it is possible for somebody else, even though I can't be doing it the same way. So I'm so glad you mentioned that. But I do have a question for you on that, in terms of when you said that different children have different learning styles. uh,
Yeah.
is it also, so does this actually mean, so, and it's important, we have covered the topic, it's important for parents and educators to understand which child has what kind of a learning style. My question is, let's say there is a child who is a kinesthetic learner and also shows, let's say, auditory learning behavior or a style, or even reading writing learning style. If they do not get to practice these learning styles, is there evidence that says that they will not comprehend anything at all, or does it say that the comprehension is worse off rather than an absolute no? The reason I ask this is it can also get teachers or educators feel a little apprehensive that, oh my god, that's a sensory, that child is a kinesthetic learner, but you can't always 100% of the time have a kinesthetic environment in the classroom. So what's your take on that?
That is so good. Yeah, because you can't just start, your class in a mud puddle all day just because you have a child that needs to feel that dirt under their fingers. But no, you're absolutely right. This is where it's tricky. And this is where a lot of the times when we introduce that new kind of concept, people don't want the change because they're overwhelmed with it. But it really is to find moments in the day, because we're also teaching our children how to interact with other people, how to work with other people. So we have to recognize that there's some people that need that quiet space to concentrate, to focus. So the social learners need to understand that there's going to be times where we need to be quiet, and they need that quiet time as well. It may not feel like it to them, but they do need that time to kind of come back to self and focus, and that mindfulness that comes along with it. But it's to find these moments when you know that you have a kinesthetic learner who gets very agitated at the end of the day. Then you might want to prepare your class or your lessons in a way that in the afternoon it could be a little bit more laid back. We could do some movement in the classroom, even if you have, let's say, physical education in the morning. You could kind of create another thing in the afternoon, another session in the afternoon where we can move a little bit. There's nothing wrong with just walking with music, just walking around our desk or our chair, or do some hand movements. Some lessons in the individual learning times, you could have a little bit of background music so that your auditory, because that you mentioned that, Sonali, and I love that you say that, because sometimes when they listen to that Taylor Swift song, when that song plays, the less what they were learning actually comes back to them. So it's beautiful to watch. But just to have these moments where we can address their particular needs. And this is why it works very well with neurodivergent students as well. That's a whole other topic. But everything that we do is workable with neurodivergent students as well. So we have quiet times where the solitary students can kind of focus. We have some movement, and the solitary students are going to appreciate that movement. I was one of those. I needed to kind of move and get my hands into it and ask questions. For your social learners, you give them those times where it's not always be quiet, sit still.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay, let's talk this through. Let's do some group work instead. Breakout sessions type of thing. So it doesn't have to be always like that, but there's some moments in the day where you know that your students needs it the most, and it gives you that flexibility, and everybody is still on board. Everybody's still excited about whatever it is that they're learning.
I love the fact that you mentioned about group work, because I was just going to mention that group work might be one of the best ways to actually take into account all the different kinds of learning styles, because the students will automatically gravitate towards what their style is. So somebody who takes up research, and I've seen this working with lots of groups. I'm a big believer of learning in groups. And the people who figure out that the students who say, I'll pick up on research, they're usually the ones for the solitary learners, because they just want to work on it. And the people who say, okay, I'll lead on this, you do this, you do this. So it also is a development of the personality of the student when they get an avenue to work as a group with other students, isn't it?
It is so important for them to develop those skills that they need later on as well, with that collaboration, with respecting other people's way of learning as well,
Yes.
but knowing that people think differently. But not only that, but you can find it interesting, because I'm the solitary learner who would prefer to work on my own. You know, I needed to be convinced that I wanted to work with other people, because to me it was just like, it'll be so much faster and easier if I do it
Faster.
myself. But
Yeah.
that's not, you can't do that. And
Yeah.
adulthood, you do need that support. You do need that collaboration, that, you know, taking turns. That's another thing that's very hard to learn in
Yeah, I mean,
school. So group
we
work is
did.
so important.
Yeah, we did this. I think both of you are aware. We did this engineering in motion workshop with lots of bunch of middle schoolers and high schoolers, and there was one child who absolutely detested working in groups, because he felt that he could just achieve it so much faster. And I actually had to have a sit down with him and tell him that, yes, you may end up doing it faster, but you know, once you grow up a little bit more, you will not be able to achieve what you want to achieve on your own. You know, humans are intelligent because we work in groups and we are a social animal. So it did take him time, and I had to do that conversation with him. And you're so right that it may not come naturally to a lot of learners, because they were learning at the end of the day. But in today's world, I don't think anybody can move ahead without collaboration. It's a
Yeah,
fundamental skill set.
Yeah,
it
love.
is, it's necessary. Oh, go ahead, Blanka.
Sorry, no, I was just going to say that I love that you talked about like experiencing, like as a class or a group of children, experiencing the different learning styles, and then within the group setting, they can work on their own, in their own style, and yet, you know, come together as a group. And I also think that it's important for us as parents and educators to actually educate them about learning styles, and that there is, and then I think that's what you're sort of touching on, Sonali, that you had this discussion with this child, that it is important to recognize that how we learn best, and also to be okay with other people learning differently. Like you mentioned, the discrepancy between you and your daughter, and I'm like your daughter. I always need music. That's my focus. I put the music on, and then my brain switches into focus mode, because otherwise my brain looks out, it's like, oh, that was a car or a dog barking, and otherwise I just can't focus. So I'm totally with your daughter on this one. And I was wondering if Danielle, you might be able to talk about any best practices that can help educators identify learning styles early on. And I was wondering if these actually change the learning styles. Do they ever change as the children develop? Like would an 8-year-old who's a kinesthetic social learner, would they still be the same as a teenager, or do they ever change?
It can change. But for the first part of the question, for especially educators and teachers, the first thing is that line of communication with the parents. So you can even have to kind of save you time from having to speak to 60 different parents to get their take on their child, is just have a questionnaire that kind of gives the general learning style, so you get an idea of what the child, because the parent may not even know what their child's learning style is. If we're introducing it now, there's a learning curve there. But I think that learning styles are kind of like personality traits. We are naturally drawn to certain types, certain traits, but depending on your life experiences and the line of work that you're in, or what you're going to study into, you learn to adapt. So you can take on new learning styles, or if some of them were suppressed early on, especially for those who like to move and touch things, and then they discover later on, or if they had to be in a quiet room, and then they realize that when they do listen to music, they can focus better. They may discover their natural learning styles that way. But there is yes, there is a progression. I mean, the way we learn as children is very different from university. There's that shock factor from going from secondary school to post-secondary school. A lot of students, even high-performing students, may struggle there. It's completely different. So you do learn to adapt. You do learn to adjust to the environment that you're in. But if you know your fundamental learning styles, then you know how to adjust those learning environments to better address what you need. And so that's why it's great in a boardroom, in a conference room, or anything like that, where you can allow a little bit of diversity into how you present, how the meetings go, how the research will go, how do you present. You're able to bring in all these elements. It makes it easier. But yes, you do kind of along the way progress into other learning styles, depending on what your lifestyle is at that moment.
That is very fascinating. I was not aware that you can actually adapt and form into another. I mean, yeah, in hindsight, when you say that your neural networks are still being formed up until the age of 24 or 25, then why shouldn't the learning styles evolve, I guess? But yeah, it does. Until you mentioned it, I kind of thought, okay, I am this kind of a learner and I would not evolve into something else as I grow up, but kind of makes sense.
And it does, and for my
sorry.
No,
Go ahead, Danielle.
No, I was going to say quickly, from my own experience as a child, I couldn't learn in school, so I had to learn the way the school expected me to learn. It's just exhausting just saying that, but you have to, children adapt very quickly, even so they are forced to learn in a way that they can't learn right now, and they do it. We still have students that do very well in school, even though they don't fit in the school system. So it is, but it's a lot more work. It's exhausting. So I would say you always kind of come back to your natural learning style.
It also makes me wonder whether different learning styles would like predispose someone to different career paths.
Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely. That's how I got into science. I was never good in science when I was in the early years. And it was that one high school teacher that was kind of the clown of the school, the cool teacher who would actually, set things on fire to make us understand that this was dangerous. He would brush his teeth in class. He would do, but he made it fun. He made it visual for me, and I don't know if, I'm pretty sure sometimes it was by accident. He didn't mean to, but he did, set a few things on fire. But that's when I started loving science. And I had my hands in it. I was dissecting stuff. I was, and so that's how I started to get interested, because science was so boring. You just had to read this text and learn everything by heart and then just spit it out at a test. That was no fun. But once we started, blowing up things, it was a lot of fun.
It hurts me to the core when somebody says science is just so boring. And I'm like, I need to meet the person who made you say that. It is a crime to say science.
We are three scientists on here, so definitely. Science isn't boring.
We failed as educators if our students think that science is boring. Absolutely.
Yeah. So with that, I actually wanted to cover another slightly different but related topic about nonverbal communication. But seeing as we are doing in terms of the time, I think that's going to take us a completely entire episode of nonverbal communication and how the different learning styles can tie in with not just verbal commands or verbal cues that a teacher or an educator or a parent can give, but rather how can we incorporate nonverbal communication to help the children understand better. So Blanka, I think we will have to invite Daniel one more time to talk about nonverbal communication. I absolutely love the topic. The eye rolls that I have and the shrugs that I have in the house with a teenager says a lot. And I would love to know how and what to read into those eye rolls. We have eye roll competitions in the house right now, but I think it's such an integral part of being whether a student, a child, or a parent or an educator. Just that glance, just that wink, you know. So yes,
It
Blanka,
Yeah,
helps a lot
yes,
with that.
definitely. So we'll schedule another time with you, Danielle, if that's okay, because
Oh,
this
I'd
was
love
just so
to.
interesting, and I learned so much today about the different learning styles, and I think we could still go on and on about it. But we'll wrap up for today. So thank you so much, Danielle. This has been so insightful. I
Thank
wanted
you.
to ask you if you wanted to share anything about your work. Where can our listeners learn more about what you do, where to get support from you if they wanted to explore things further with you? I know that you have recently published a fantastic book, so please, everyone, will put a link to that in the show notes, so go check that out. Also to support Danielle and other people like us with the work we do. So yes, Danielle, please let us know how can everyone get
First of all,
involved
we'll talk about the
with you?
book is Bringing Up the World, how to finally focus on what matters and watch the child bloom. So it really touches on a lot of what we just talked about today. I do cover learning styles and how to communicate with how schools and parents can communicate to help the child thrive and have this academic success. LinkedIn is a great way to contact me. I'm there if you want more information on the programs or the support that I bring. I do have some programs for teachers and educators, and I have some for parents as well. So it kind of balances out. And I do have a YouTube channel under Being Connected eLearning Inc. And there is a playlist there that's called Teachers Corners, and it works for parents because parents are teachers as well. So I'm working on that one now. So there are a few clips there right now that talks about the learning styles and how to work your house or your school, your classroom to accommodate those learning styles. I talk about emotions, and then the nonverbal stuff will be coming up as well because that's a language on its own. And yes, so any Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok, I'm on there, but LinkedIn would be a good way. My website as well. I'm giving you a lot there, but on my website, you have the information as well. It's beingconnected.ca.
Thank
thank you
you.
so much, Daniel, for that. Yes, as Blanka said, it has been so insightful. Learning styles seems like just, oh, 4 categories, but there's so much depth and nuance to each of them and how we can best utilize it. And I think this conversation must be an eye opener to a lot of people as to how much depth we can go into to optimize the results for our children or students. And we will, as Blanka mentioned, we will be putting up your coordinates on the description of the YouTube when we set it up. And to all our viewers, if you have any questions for Danielle or you want to reach out to her, please reach out to her on LinkedIn or through the links and her website that we'll be putting up on the YouTube channel. Or also, if you want to reach out to Blanka or I, with respect to any of our guests, please do that on LinkedIn. So I think all three of us are very active on LinkedIn, and that is probably the best platform to connect with us. So thank you,
very
everyone.
much.
Thank you
Bye.
so much.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on Nurturing Minds. We hope today's conversation gave you something to think about or try out in your own life.
If you enjoyed the episode, please follow or subscribe. Leave us a rating and share it with anyone who might find it helpful.
And if there's a topic you'd love us to explore, feel free to message us or leave a comment. We would love to hear from you.
Until next time, stay curious, connected, and kind.